Good evening, everyone. Israel is now deep into the third day of a defensive war against Hamas after the terror organization caught the security echelon off guard with a major assault on the country Saturday. According to unconfirmed media reports, current numbers stand at 800 Israelis dead, including 260 massacred at a rave in the south, and 130 said to be abducted into Gaza. But again, these numbers are unconfirmed. And of course, an unknown number of wounded. Palestinians continue to launch rockets at the south and center of Israel, and several incidents have occurred on the northern border since yesterday. The IDF is striking targets in the Strip, and gun battles continue along the periphery, but a ground invasion has yet to ensue. With us to attempt to make sense of what lies ahead is Israel's most recent national security advisor and head of the National Security Council, Dr. Eyal Hulata, joining us from Washington, where he is a senior international fellow at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies, the FDD. Dr. Hulata, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm sure this is very difficult to watch from afar.
Yes, thank you, Talia. Thank you, Eli, and hello to you all. I think some of you I've spoken to already a few days ago. Yeah, it is very difficult to watch from afar. But I recognize that it's much more difficult to be embedded in there. And to whom of you have relatives that have been at it or serving in the defense forces, as we say in Hebrew, שיהיו בשורות טובות ותשמרו על עצמכם. May you all keep safe in everything you do. Okay, I will start by giving a broad description of how I see things. Naturally, if you want to hear operational details, you need a military man wearing uniform. This is not my angle. I do want to cover the more implications of what's going on, the options ahead, the kind of dilemmas that the government we need to deal with, and a little bit about the international community coverage and response, which will be increasingly more important to fulfill what I think must be done. So we'll just start with the situation on the ground. And again, probably you're informed. We need to watch very carefully what's happening in Adamit to see how this will play out and what is Nasrallah's angle on this. I'll talk about this. And as it comes to Gaza itself, look, as you can see, it was clear that this needs to happen. We've finished the first round of containing and dealing with all of what happened in this horrific attack and infiltration by Hamas. And now we go on offense. And as should be expected in circumstances like this, the offensive will be hard and intense. I want to make sure that we're all in understanding about the kind of calculus that is playing ahead. I think more and more is being talked about the how did this happen and how did Israel was able to be caught by surprise like this. On the intelligence side, the other piece of it, of course, is how not well prepared we were on the hard defense, the military defense, to protect the communities. There were not enough soldiers and capabilities there to go into action once a surprise attack has happened, which is something that was anticipated, is anticipated, and we should have been better. But there's something else there that some of you in the previous conversation we started talking about. Hamas has made a very, I would say, strategic decision to play out of the playbook of Hamas in recent years. Ever since 2014 of Tzuk Eitan, all of the engagements with Hamas were under a mindset that they were trying to erode our civilians, shoot rockets, cause damage. They saw us bringing our defenses up. They saw us creating and perfecting Iron Dome to the best we can and building the fence, not only above the ground, but also below the ground. In 2021, in Garden of the Walls, they're tactical deficits were very visible to Hamas. Of course, they fired rockets for a long time, but I think that the infliction of damage on them was harder than the infliction of damage on us. Ever since 2021, Hamas, I wouldn't say refrained from acting because it did, and during the previous government, every time they even fired a balloon, we hit them back very, very hard to make sure that they understand that this shouldn't escalate. But the strategy of Hamas was to try to extract what they can on the more, I would say, economic side. We approved workers. There were several initiatives on the restoration of the damages from 2014 and 2021. We negotiated indirectly with them over the return of our boys, the two missing in action, Adar Goldin, Oron Shaul, and the two civilians, Avera Mengistu and Hisham Sayed. In parentheses, I will say that it's very difficult to believe that there will be an official that can remember all of the name of the hostages that are now in Gaza. That bad the situation is. But this is exactly what Hamas chose to do. They chose to play out of the playbook. Indeed, we were surprised. Indeed, we should have been better prepared to defend on this. But Hamas chose to use almost all of the tools that he has from Gaza to attack simultaneously and to inflict the largest damage it can on our civilians, and he's done so very brutally with scenes that we're used to see from Daesh and ISIS and not from Hamas. But this is what they did. And now, after doing that, clearly, the leadership of Hamas must have recognized that if they play out of the playbook, Israel will play out of the playbook. I don't know what will be the goal of the war that the cabinet will approve. They're still talking about it and weighing options. And it's also probable that they won't expose it to the public until later on and keep it within. But in this kind of circumstances, what Israel needs to do and probably will do is to aim at ending this conflict when Hamas is no longer in control in Gaza. We have refrained from doing that for very long because of the costs that will be coming out of this kind of decision, in an understanding that we can kind of manage the situation. Israel did not suffer a lot of casualties from Gaza in recent years because our defenses were so high. Well, all this changed 2 days ago. And once it did, the strategy of Israel needs to be the same. Now, our government is struggling with many things. This is not the most adequate form of cabinet to go on something like that. But this is the situation. This was imposed on us, and we will react accordingly. And I think what you're also seeing is a very strong rallying up of the Israeli community in all of its sectors, as was anticipated. I'm not surprised. I'm sure that you that live here long enough in Israel, of course, live long enough, also know that we can fight amongst ourselves on many things, and we have good reasons to fight among themselves. Unfortunately, over the last few months, but once we are in under attack and in crisis, we come together, and this shouldn't come to a surprise to anyone. And Hamas should have anticipated that as well. And this is how I think things will play out. This is why you see a very aggressive response already, and without mobilization of the ground forces. The decision to close the supply of electricity and of goods was imminent. No debate about it. This had to happen very fast, and it did. The calling of people and towns to evacuate the premise so that there will be as little collateral damage as possible has been issued by the Prime Minister himself, by others, and it will continue to do so, because we will be moving in this way with an aim to hit Hamas at the hardest we can. And again, if it was up to me, this is what I would recommend the government to approve as a goal for this war. This has to end when Hamas is no longer in control of the Gaza Strip, and we'll have to see how this will play out on those fields. So that's on Gaza and the situation on the ground. As for the international community, I'm here in Washington. I talk to many people here. I talk
Dr.
also to
Hulata,
people.
before we continue on to that second aspect of the situation, could we just get a little bit more detail about what that would look like? Your recommendation to eliminate Hamas's control over the Strip, what does that mean, tactically speaking? How does Israel do that?
Yeah, so I think it would be unwise to get into a detailed description of that, how that would look like. But clearly, this cannot be achieved only from the air. This will mean that Israel will need to be very direct in the pressure that it applies to the leadership of Hamas, to the vehicles of control in which it sees the throat of the population. You should know, I mean, this is something that has been talked before. We just overlook this because it's usually that way. But the Hamas is not a popular movement in Gaza. In recent, over the last year, it is very eminent that they're not able to get the support of the population. I don't expect the population there to rally out. I don't expect them to be active and physical about it. But Israel should target Hamas. Israel should target the personnel of Hamas, the infrastructure of Hamas, and to deprive them from their capability of maintaining the grip over the Strip. I don't want to be more detailed on this, but the
Okay,
second
we
aspect
do have
of
a
it.
question though
But I just let me finish this, Talia, because the second aspect of how to do this is not military; it is diplomatic and political. And I think that and I wanted to start saying this. I can leave that to later, but I'll just give this angle here. This is not only Israel's interest that Hamas loses grip of Gaza. The Arab countries around us are very reluctant to say this out loud sometimes, and they feel obligated to be loyal to the Palestinian cause, and we've seen this play out during this time. But those countries also recognize, and I know this because I talk to prominent people in those countries, the people behind this attack derailed the normalization process with Saudi Arabia. Clearly, that was their aim, and clearly, unfortunately, they will be successful in that. They also were also exhibiting scenes that we weren't used to seeing from this faction of Sunni extremisms. We've seen this kind of action from ISIS in other parts of the Middle East, not here. Now, Hamas' ability to do this to Israelis, to shoot children and women and families in their beds in the morning in hundreds and dozens, this is not something that we used to see from these organizations. They've changed the play of the book, and this has an implication of how Egypt sees this. This is an implication of how the Gulf sees this, an implication of how Jordan sees this, clearly an implication of how the Palestinian Authority should see this. So a part of this, and hopefully Israel will be able to do this, and with the support of the international community, there should be a push for this outcome, not only from the Israeli military action, but from the region as a whole. Organizations like Hamas should not have a right to control population, should not have a right to govern the lives of 2 million people and put them in this when this is how they choose to conduct their business. Talia, back to you.
If we're already talking about the wider international community, you're there in Washington now. Perhaps you can provide some insight about what the Americans have been saying to you and what you've been hearing about how to move forward, especially in light of what you just said, which is groundbreaking, that this has really blown up the whole Saudi process.
Yeah. So I think what everybody's hearing from the administration at the moment is unequivocal support. The statement given by President of the United States Biden, Secretary of State Blinken, Secretary of Defense Austin are all very, very clear and very, very strong messages. The decision to send the Ford carrier, Israel doesn't need that militarily, but the message of this to the region, the willingness of the United States to put a power projection posture in the region at this point is a very strong signal. Again, this does not change the military aspect. We don't expect those planes from that carrier to bomb targets in Gaza alongside the IDF. We can do that on our own. But there is a message there of support and of understanding that something dramatic has changed in the calculus. Now, I mean, several Americans have been out in the media saying or maybe hoping that this will not have an effect on the negotiation with Saudi Arabia. I don't want to talk about this now. I think that what Israel needs to focus now is how to achieve the goals that it will say. This will take time. This can take a lot of time. And while it takes time, of course, nothing else can happen in this arena. Can we finish this and still be able to normalize with Saudi Arabia? I hope so. I don't think that this will strategically derail it. I mean, the decision made by the Saudis will be intact, and if it doesn't happen now, it will happen in the future. But of course, I would want this to happen with this realm. I think this will be a very strong ability to project that this did not succeed. They may have taken close to 1,000. I don't know how this will end lives of Israelis in this, but this will be a wonderful message. It's ironic that these attacks are happening in large masses and scales when Israel is involved in negotiations for normalization. We've seen Hamas at its worst in the 90s during the Oslo Accords, and now this in parallel to that, but this is what we're dealing with.
Understandably, and of course, we saw yesterday the condemnation by the UAE of what's happening. So that really is, it says something.
Yep.
I just want to mention that the rocket attacks are still continuing, so there might be a chance that some people on the line will have to run to their safe rooms. For those of you across the other side of the world, please be patient should that happen. I myself can hear planes flying above, so just take that into consideration. We're dealing with also, the possibility of this turning into a multi-front war. We've talked mainly about Gaza. We know that some international organizations have stopped funding to the PA. How likely could, we see factions from the West Bank joining? What's happening on the northern border? What are the possibilities we might be looking at?
Right. So far, as possibilities goes, this could evolve, unfortunately, into a multi-front confrontation. It could. I hope it doesn't. I hope it doesn't because this will put Israel in a more difficult situation. But this will also signal that our abilities to make progress on the various fronts will be very, very limited. If West Bank erupts, if Palestinian Authority erupts, this will end the things. There are not potentially many things that are happening positively in the West Bank at the moment, but there are things, of course, over a period of time that could happen. I hope that this does not happen. The Palestinians do not open an intifada. The ability of Hamas in Judea and Samaria to inflict damage in large amounts is limited. And I would assume that they would do whatever they can. Lebanon is a different story. In Lebanon, there are two things that we should be worried about. One, Hamas has capabilities in Lebanon. They have rockets in Lebanon. They've fired it in the past, and they could do that. But of course, the more eminent and grave risk is that Hezbollah joins this. I think that the fact that they did not join the surprise attack on Saturday says a lot about the way they calculated it. If they wanted to inflict the most damage and the deadliest toll on Israelis, they would do that if they had joined back in Saturday. Just imagine what would have happened if Radwan forces would infiltrate our communities and villages in the north in parallel to Gaza. This could have been quite dramatic. They chose not to do this. Maybe they didn't think that they will succeed. Maybe they, in hindsight, after they've seen what happened in Gaza, they might have think that they missed an opportunity. I hope they don't think that, but they might. But in any case, this is behind them. They know now that we're ready. And I think what they see now in Adamit is that maybe they can cross the border, but they will meet soldiers, not civilians, and they will be hit. And once they do that, then aircrafts are in the air and artillery and whatever comes with it to act. Israel clearly is signaling to Hezbollah, don't mess with us, we're ready. Don't think you can surprise us, and don't join. But there might be a miscalculation. There might be a reasoning behind this. 2 days ago, one of you have asked if it's possible that that Hezbollah is waiting until we're depleted with Iron Domes. Well, maybe they think that if they join a few weeks in the future, then our defenses are not as strong. We'll have to see how this evolves. My hope is, of course, that it does not turn into a multi-front war, that we're able to focus on Gaza. But this
Is
is one
Israel
of
capable of fighting a multi-front war on its own, or would we have
yeah,
to,
we're capable.
involve
Look,
other?
we're not capable. I see some of the questions arising in the chat. There's a valid question: are we capable of toppling Hamas, and what will happen after we do that? Israel cannot topple Hezbollah in a multi-front war, of course, but Israel can inflict a lot of damage on Hezbollah and a lot of damage in Lebanon in a multi-front war. And if Hezbollah decides to do this now, clearly their signal, like Hamas before that, is that they're just doing it to impose as much damage they can on our civilian population, and we will need to hit hard on their civilian population as well. Israel does not want that. Israel is not looking for that. We've signaled to Nasrallah publicly and through other means that they shouldn't join this. They shouldn't enter the war, and I hope they don't.
So you've spoken a lot about our immediate enemies; those are on our immediate borders. We did, however, hear reports that Iran gave the green light for this massive assault several weeks ago. Has this changed anything in terms of Israel's strategy vis-a-vis Iran? Can you elaborate a little bit about that?
So first, I think we need to be cognizant that Iran has been influencing Hamas for a long time. This is not a new issue. Iran has been the vehicle to transfer funds to Hamas military branch for a long time, and there were things done in this regard in the past. I think what we're experiencing in recent months is a more direct involvement of Iran on Hamas, understanding that if they can inflame West Bank, Gaza, then that is in their advantage. There were a lot of reporting about Iranian involvement also in the chain of attacks in the West Bank a few months ago, ending up in several dozen of Israeli murdered in various places. And Salah Harouri, I think, was even public in saying that he's thanking Iranian support for the things that he was doing back then, and now we see this in Gaza. I read the report. I don't know the details behind him, but I would believe that Wall Street Journal will fact check what they put there. So I'll take it at face value. But in any case, it is clearly in Iran's interest to have something like this right now. Iran has always chose to confront us by proxy and not directly. And they've used Hezbollah for that means for a very long time. Hezbollah is not serving this purpose for many years now for various reasons. The situation in Lebanon is difficult, and I think Nasrallah has a stronger memory than others about what would happen if he starts a war. So Hamas is a very appropriate vehicle. Of course, Islamic Jihad in Gaza was one as well, but Islamic Jihad in 3 rounds did very minimal damage, so very little value from an Iranian perspective. And Hamas, as we've seen, can be much more devastating, unfortunately. So this clearly plays in Iranian strategy. Iran clearly wanted to derail the negotiation process with Saudi Arabia. But having said all of that, I don't think none of that matters in the immediate future. Israel must focus now on Hamas. We need to finish this campaign. And as I said before, to aim at removing them from controlling Gaza. We have an open account with the Iranians. This is not the time to talk about the progress of the Iranian nuclear program and what will happen when the sunset of the ballistic missile evaporates. In today is the 9th of October, I think 9 days from now. And what will that mean on proliferation of missiles in the region and also in Europe and to Russia and others? This is not the time to talk about that. We can do this. This is what we were supposed to talk about, right, Eli, when we scheduled this session before that. But I'll be more than welcome to come again. But I don't want to talk about this now. There are many things that Israel needs to do with Iran. There are many things that I think Israel will do with Iran. But this is not our immediate issue.
I know that you mentioned at the beginning, what went wrong, at least at on an intelligence level. But one journalist is asking about the report that came out today that Egypt had in fact warned Israel that something was cooking on the border, and that maybe these warnings were ignored. This is painfully similar to what transpired between Jordan and Israel prior to the 1973 war. Do you have any thoughts on this?
Look, again, I don't want to be specific because I don't know the details, but I think that generally something, and I say this as a senior official of an intelligence organization in the past, there are points in time when our reliance on intelligence is too heavy. Sometimes we need to act and make decisions, not because we know what's going to happen, but because we have an understanding of what might happen. And in those circumstances, when we wait to hear the alert, we miss it for various reasons. This happened in 73, and again, I'm not in the details, but I would be very, very surprised if this is not a part of what happened here. A reliance on our ability to know before this starts. And then all those questions, Talia, are relevant, right? Did the Egyptians warn us? Did they not warn us? Did we have an asset? We didn't have an asset. Were they able to pull off a disguise and to trick us? Well, obviously they did. But underneath all of that, Israel should have known that we could be surprised by Hamas. And if this happens, the communities are so close to the border that they need to be protected. So in this regard, what more worries me is that our defenses weren't there to absorb a surprise attack than our ability to detect it in real time. But that's for a different story.
Sure. We have a few more questions coming in through the chat, but also through WhatsApp from other journalists. The Wall Street Journal is asking if you think that Hamas was tricking Israel when it gave the perception that it was interested in economic incentives.
So, when we look at it in perspective, this has been Hamas's strategy for many years. Now, the word tricked Israel, let's decipher that for a minute. Israel in no point had illusions that Hamas' ultimate goal is to kick us out if they can. All of the economic collaboration was tools or vehicles to keep the situation calm because Israel did not want war. Israel did not want to inflict on itself and of course also on Gaza the implications of going after Hamas and toppling them down. Now we're about to see how this will play out, but Israel didn't seek this. Israel had other issues more grave to deal with: Iran, Hezbollah, and other things. And more than everything, and I say this plainly, Israel does not want war. We're not looking for that. We're not looking to exercise our strength whenever we have an opportunity. So I don't think tricking is the right word here. I think that over the last few months, Israel failed to understand that Hamas strategy has changed. That this is not only about getting economic gain that will allow them to keep the people around, above the water and avoid an humanitarian crisis on behalf of Hamas, which is what they looked for, and which is what they should have looked for, because Sinwar was responsible for the lives of 2 million Palestinians in the Strip. Sometime along the last several months, they changed their course. When they started planning this with an ambition to operate this, they knew that once they do this, the old story is over. Clearly, Israel missed that signal. Clearly, Israel did not understand this paradigm shift. So if that's what you meant by tricking, then the answer is yes. But if it's more broadly, I think Israel acted very soundly and responsibly when we manage the situation in a way that the lives of the Palestinians are not too severe. It is severe, but not too severe, so that we can maintain some level of stability in the Gaza Strip and not be inflicted in something like we're going to see in a few days.
Sure. We have time just for a few more questions, I hope, because there are some coming in. You mentioned the need for a ground invasion in order to really achieve Israel's goals in this war, but we do know that there are many captives being held in the Strip. How does that impact the ability for the IDF to operate, and could we be looking at a prisoner swap deal beforehand, during, after?
So, of course, it must be taken into consideration. We have live hostages in Gaza, or I should say, I hope they're still alive. I'm like you, I guess. What's been driven in social media is horrific, and I don't know if what they did with a large amount of hostages. I hope that they are keeping their lives. But if what I'm saying is right, then maybe they're not doing that in extreme care. So, of course, this has an implication calculation. But I mean, Israel have had two soldiers missing in action and two live civilians in Gaza for 9 years now, and we weren't able to take them back. And this I can say from firsthand. I participated in coordinating the attempts to do this under the previous government, and I think you've heard me before say this. We made progress, and I think that we should have and could have done that had the government stayed in power. This is all behind us now, and now we will need to act. This is one of the parameters that we'll take into consideration. How to protect our forces while they do this will be also very eminent, and a lot of very careful planning and execution on behind of the ideas.
Very clear. Just one last question, and you've provided a great segue to it. Given the situation that it is really the worst we've ever seen, at least in my generation, could you see any chances for a unity government coming together in this time of war?
Yeah. So first, Talia, I have to say that, and again, you're much younger than me, but I think this is not only in our generations. Israel did not suffer a deadly day like this ever, ever. In the whole of the independence war, we had above 6,000 casualties. In the whole of Yom Kippur war, we had about 3,600, if I'm not mistaken, casualties. We suffered almost 1,000 in one day, most of them civilians, families, uh, kids, women, elderly, handicapped, all of them. So this is not just in our generation. This is the deadliest day in Israel history of conflict. I think that this calls for extreme measures, as I said before, and I think that this also calls for the need of a unity government, and I hope it's naturally in the hands of Prime Minister Netanyahu. He's in power. He needs to relinquish power to new partners for this. He needs to find a way to have it in a meaningful way so that they can be influential and manage this. I think every Israeli should want now that the most experienced people, cool-minded, and that have the support of the majority of the people of Israel in the decision-making process managing this war. Especially because I understand what's coming up next when we start a ground operation in Gaza. This is what should happen, and I hope that Netanyahu does that. In any case, he will get the support from the entire society of Israel. I'm not just talking about the political level. I'm talking about the society, naturally of the political level, in whatever choice he makes in this. But I truly hope that he chooses to form a unity government. Yes.
Dr. Eyal Hulata, Israel's most recent national security advisor and head of the National Security Council. Thank you so much for your time, and I really hope that the next time we speak will be under better circumstances.
I hope so too, but I fear that it won't, and I'll be available as you need. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Goodbye, everybody.